Great. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. And really glad to be here today and talking on this topic here with my colleague, Rick Serber. We're working with organizations and really everybody's trying to make sense of AI in really practical terms. What does it mean for the records, information, and, honestly, at the end of the day, how teams work. So just a quick intro to virtual coffee. If you haven't joined us before, welcome. I'm seeing some familiar names, a lot of new ones as well. We kind of like to think of this as a little bit more of casual discussion and kind of keep it loose if we can. Of course, we've got a presentation kind of slide deck, but more so to guide our conversation and introduce talking points. And everybody likes some good visuals too. So, but we'll be together here for about the next hour. And along the way, we're going to introduce some quick polls, a short quiz. And so go ahead and pop your answers to some of these questions in the chat as helpful. But yeah, hopefully you have your coffee, tea, whatever your drink of choice is this morning that we'll kind of be sipping as we go along. And I think today our goal is pretty straightforward. By the end of the discussion, hoping that we all have kind of a shared vocabulary and some foundational ideas, thinking about, what AI readiness is. And it's going to be organized around 6 key goals, or what we're calling kind of governance pillars. And so we'll get into each of those and talk about that. And hopefully, you can kind of leave this thinking about maybe a practical first step that you can take to your organization. And I think the reason this keeps coming up is a lot of organizations are really feeling pressure to move quickly with AI, probably already have the technology introduced, and probably a lot of different areas depending on how large your organization is. And of course, leadership is wanting to see the benefits. Teams are experimenting with tools. Vendors are moving very quickly. Technology is getting onboarded really quickly. But underneath all of it is this harder question: is the information those tools rely on really ready to be read, interpreted, and kind of used by these machines? So that's where our coffee metaphor comes in today. And I thought this was pretty clever. I can't take all the credit for it, but we'll be using it throughout the session to kind of paint this picture and maybe draw some connections a little bit easier between all the great ingredients that go into coffee and how they relate to the great ingredients that make AI success. So just like a good cup of coffee depends on more than one good ingredient, AI readiness depends on more than just buying a tool and turning it on. So yeah, just a couple notes. The polls are anonymous, by the way. We're not going to be sharing that information. And as Jerry mentioned, we'll share the slide deck afterwards. So why don't we go ahead to our next slide and dig in. So here is our icebreaker poll number 1. Just kind of quiz the audience here. How AI ready do you think your organization's information really is? And I'm yeah, let's see what everybody has to say. I'm expecting a good mix on this. Rick and I kind of always put like low key, not real bets, because that's against company rules, but we're always kind of kind of guessing how everybody's going to answer, and pockets of good, pockets of chaos was kind of a front runner, I think, when we were discussing, and that's showing up for sure. So
A few more were in great shapes than I expected, which is great.
yeah, absolutely. I know I was kind of thinking, well, we're in great shape for, and please don't make me answer this for, so they kind of, it's definitely a bell curve on those answers.
Okay, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results here. Can everyone see that? It looks like we've got a majority in pockets of good, pockets of chaos. Second runner-up is honestly a bit of a swamp, and then we're in great shape, and please don't make me answer this, are tied for 9%.
Yeah, great.
All right, so just to get us started here, you can see how we've struck, which tool should we deploy as the real question. From the RIM IG perspective, I think the question that actually predicts whether AI is successful isn't which tool. It's whether your information is ready for the tool and whether all these pillars that we're going to be discussing are in place. And a lot of that is because AI doesn't clean up messy information unless you're specifically using it for that purpose. Which, I mean, it's good at that if it's done correctly. But if your information is messy, it'll actually amplify it. It's the same mess, and now it's faster. It's very confident, as those of us that are using AI know, and it's at scale. So these statistics, almost no one feels ready. When Cloudera and Harvard Business Review asked enterprises this year, only 7% said their data was completely ready for AI. The overwhelming majority admit that they're struggling. So if that's you, you're in very good company. It's normal. Looks like a few of you are in better shape than that, but most of us are dealing with the mess right now. Pair that with what McKinsey found in this statistic, adoption is basically everywhere. Nearly 9 in 10 organizations are using AI somewhere. But when you ask how many can point to real measurable effect on the bottom line, it drops well under half. So we've got near universal adoption with a majority seeing profitability based on it. So the gap between we're using it and it's working is fairly significant here. And perhaps the most sobering, MIT looked at custom-built Gen A pilots and found the vast majority delivered essentially zero measurable return. So here's what I want you to take from that. When they dug into why, it usually wasn't the technology, the models were working fine. What sank the pilots was everything underneath, the data, the access, the governance, all of the pillars that we're going to be discussing today. So 3 different kind of research groups, 3 different methods, all pointing in the same direction. So I think that's the case for slowing down during this session. We're not saying don't do AI, absolutely do it.
Mhm.
But we're recognizing that the organizations getting value aren't the ones with the fanciest models. They're the ones whose information was ready for it. Governance is what turns AI from a demo into something you can actually benefit from and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's get into talking about our recipe. So, brewing a great cup. What does this involve? So, I liked this quote here, but nail a component. It's a chef's kiss. Skip one, and you're drinking something disappointing, no matter how fancy the machine. So we want to stay away from gas station coffee, basically, right? How do we get this optimal brew? We want quality, we want rich, we want flavorful. So let's talk about these pillars that make up our recipe here. So first, governance. Yeah, we call it the recipe, the ratios. And at the end of the day, it's really talking about who, decides how it's made and what is going to be our standard here. Somebody has to kind of own what AI is allowed to touch, what types of systems, what types of information, access controls, all these different things that will kind of play into that. And to be clear, a committee that never meets is not ownership. So you kind of start to get the idea here where we'll head with that. And some of this I'll just kind of preface as we go through will sound a bit familiar for RIM, for kind of some of the RIM and IG components. For sure, there's a lot of overlap here, which is actually great. So hang in there. Let's go to our next one. And that is information quality. So we're going to say the beans and the water is what we're going to compare this to here. So it is thinking about what are your raw inputs. And in coffee, we're talking if you've got stale beans, then you've got a bad cup. The machine, the technology, really can't save it. And AI can't tell really the final policy from a draft that somebody completed and kind of discarded years ago, unfortunately. And so we hear this expression a lot, but with AI, it's garbage in, garbage out. We'll kind of dive in deeper to each of these. And I think information quality will get a special extra, I think, look because it is so, I think, important and it happens to draw and relate to a lot of these other pillars in very direct ways. So we'll talk about that, but certainly this is a main player here in creating the right recipe. Let's go to our next. All right, the metadata. Let's compare this to the label on the bag. Just a few important, maybe we'll say a handful of important data points really kind of gives us the information that we need in order to make the right decisions. And that's what AI needs as well. With coffee, we're talking about the origin, the roast date, the grind, the notes. But, with no label, no roast date, AI has no idea what it's brewing. So without metadata, AI doesn't know whose content it is, whether it still matters, how recent it is, all these different information points are really important. The more accurate information metadata that's available, the better AI will function. And let's go to our next pillar. So retention and disposition. And with our coffee metaphor here, we think of that as fresh in, grounds out. Brew fresh, dump the spent grounds, don't hoard the expired bag. And really, I think this is where, some of our, I don't want to say failures, but, some of our main objectives maybe perhaps not achieved. All of those files that you aspired to get rid of and are still lingering after years and sitting in the index, you're keeping it and now it is, just continuing to feed the model. So, and that's kind of what that relates to. I think retention and disposition might resonate pretty well with some folks. But yeah, like I said, some of this will sound familiar for sure.
Sounds like a
And
couple people are having trouble seeing the slides. Is everyone seeing the slides all right? Go ahead and keep going, Jen, and
okay,
people can comment in the, oh, we got some thumbs up, so. Okay, good.
okay. All right, let's keep on. Sorry about that. Hopefully that resolves itself. All right. So yeah, going on to our next one, technology, the equipment. I think a lot of folks are learning this, a lot of organizations and, bringing us to the topic for the day, but buying the tool is the easy part. It's the new shiny object. Speaking with really great salespeople, they can definitely sell you on all the wonderful capabilities that AI really does, these systems, offer and have. But yeah, buying that tool is really kind of the easy part, onboarding it, and it's the integration, access controls, and and making that decision. What is it safe to access, and when is it safe to turn that technology on? I think is the more difficult part. And so these pillars kind of help, I think, highlight that. I think technology tends to be the fall guy. If something goes awry, it's the easy thing to point the finger at. But it's really not always the case if you really kind of think about, yes, of course, technology fails, but all these different components, of course, are really important to the recipe. And then finally, lest we forget, workforce adoption, so change management. These are the baristas and the drinkers, the people who follow, who know, who appreciate, who kind of consume the recipe and cup after cup. And I think one of the fundamentals here, and I'll just put it, kind of simply just to begin with, but making the governed path the most convenient and intuitive, is really kind of one of those main objectives. If you make it inconvenient or difficult, people will figure out a way to go around it. And with AI system solutions, I think, it really kind of also is amplified a little bit because there are now so many different ways to try to go around. We'll talk a little bit about shadow AI and what that looks like and how to be kind of aware of it within the organization and folks kind of maybe going around to try to maybe use solutions, for example, that they prefer, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But certainly, when it comes to workforce adoption, that's also, I think, a very risky place where you can put everything together perfectly, and if nobody adopts it or follows it, ultimately you have a big failure. So we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more depth as we go along. And I just want to point out, the order here is somewhat deliberate, and technology is fifth. And, this is really where most organizations start. And I think that's exactly the reason so many pilots, stall. We want to start with the recipe, the beans first, and then we want to also kind of think about the technology, as uh, a subsequent kind of step along that line. So really kind of forcing you to rethink the order here, but also I think recognize these are all interdependent. They depend upon each other. They feed upon each other. We'll have some quizzes, polls, and you think about some of these things, and you'll kind of recognize where sometimes it'll be hard to decide. Well, was it information quality, or was it the metadata that was the issue, or really is it kind of both? You'll kind of start to see how they relate to each other and interrelate. So yeah, well, why don't we, Rick, if it sounds okay, why don't we dig into our first pillar, which is governance?
Yeah, and so on governance, these statistics here, I think that the point to this 63% one, it's that most organizations can't say who authorizes a use case, which data it touches, who's accountable when the wrong output is acted on. And so I think that's powerful, and that's something that is problematic. It matters because someone in the organization is already using AI on work content.
Mhm,
The question is it authorized? Is it bounded, documented, or is it invisible? We have to distinguish policy from decision rights here. Policy says what's allowed. Decision rights say who decides when policy is silent, which is a lot of the time when technology is moving fast, unfortunately. And I think the practical test of maturity isn't whether an AI policy exists. It's how long it takes to get to yes or no on a new use case and whether the answer is consistent across departments. Luckily, we've got our IG and RIM roots. Nothing needs to be invented here. An IG committee, records policy, delegations of authority, all these legal hold protocols, all these should already be in the machinery. And AI is really a new matter routed through that existing body, hopefully, if things are
mhm,
already in order. Standing up an AI council is something that a lot of people are doing. And that's fine, although there are some overlapping authority and escalation path issues with that. So if you haven't already set up an AI council, you might consider adding AI as a standing agenda item to, an existing IG committee. I think it fits well there. The discipline our records people in the room have practiced for decades is now really the foundation of AI capability. And their absence from the conversation is definitely problematic. So to the extent that an AI committee is something that's happening at your organization, IG and RIM should absolutely be key players in that.
mm,
And so yeah, we've also kind of on each of these slides got this little bullet about how AI can be used to kind of help AI. And so, it can, policy and tool, drafting and things like that are definitely a thing in AI. And you can point it at things like ISO 1549, the NIST AI risk management framework. and it can help you find those gaps in hours rather than months. So I mean, it's powerful, but it does need that human touch, that human review, that human revision, to do it. Because I mean, really, anything created by AI doesn't create authority. It
Mhm.
can produce the document, but only the human can own the decision, defend it to a regulator, and say, whether it's defensible or not. So,
Mhm.
with all these things, you have to use caution with what AI can do in helping you with these, especially on the governance side.
I'm really curious, and I kind of want to throw this out to the audience. Is there anybody who really kind of has at their organization a standalone AI committee, or they've actually integrated AI specifically as part of their governance framework within their records and information management, or IG? If anybody be willing to kind of throw that out there, I'm just kind of curious to get a general sense like how that's evolving. We got some thumbs up. Okay,
For
that's
AI
great.
committees. Yep.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, good.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. On to our next poll question.
Oh,
This one is who owns the decision about whether your AI tools can be which data your AI tools can access. So I'll go ahead and launch that. Um, a lot of organizations have ownership gaps. I think that's something that
mhm.
we know. And like I said, someone in your organization has already posted something to AI this morning. I guarantee it. Contract, policy, draft. Hopefully not client data, but maybe. The question isn't whether it's happening; it's whether it's authorized. And so, who owns the decision? Is kind of it's a big it's a big question, and how long does it take to get the answer? So
Wow.
looks like we do have some ownership kind of already decided,
Mm.
which is great. Um, we've got IT owning it as the default, being the number one so far. It looks like answers are still coming in. Give it another second. All right, let's take a look at those results.
Wow. Okay. I think this is kind of what we maybe predicted. Did we, Rick?
We did. Yep. Yep. IT owns the plumbing.
Yeah.
But I mean, unfortunately, they're not the ones that know, which records are under legal hold, which data is regulated, all those
Hmm.
things. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think that it's common that IT is going to be the one just because it's a new technology, and that's where it naturally routes.
Yeah. I actually expected kind of more with legal compliance, to be honest. But yeah, interesting. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about pillar number 2, information quality. Um, we've got the beans, the water. Oh, we had somebody chime in here with an interesting comment. Company records manager under IT, so that's why it's under IT.
Oh
IT
yeah.
director is very aware of legal holds, governance, etc. Oh, no in-house legal counsel. I see. Yeah. I think it always looks a little bit different depending on your organization and the size and how your different business areas, departments are organized as resources, all those different things. Yeah, that's
Yep.
great. Great comment. Um, Yeah, let's get into kind of these stats here. So, might not find this surprising, but according to a Gartner article from last year, about half of generative AI project failures traced to poor data quality. It's one of one of the primary reasons, really. So, and I think that is more and more the case for sure. Also, we've got 81% report data quality problems and 85% say leadership isn't really addressing them. This is another 2025 poll. This gap between knowing and acting is kind of a really big problem there. I think that's really interesting. And if I were to kind of think about it in the context of our pillars, does that go back to a top-down governance issue. Overall, that's I thought that statistic was really kind of interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, here's the reality. And like I said, we'll probably spend a little bit more extra time talking about the slide. Information quality is a prerequisite. It's not kind of this post-launch cleanup afterthought that maybe in some, limited RIM projects we've thought about in that way. And, you can roll out a pilot, but you cannot pilot your way past bad inputs. It will just kind of prove that your inputs are bad at the end, and it ends up being a really expensive mistake. So, I think as we kind of talked about this garbage in, garbage out concept and expression that we often hear. And the scary thing about AI is it doesn't really kind of degrade gracefully when inputs are bad. It really kind of fails, spectacularly and invisibly. And that's kind of a scary thing, really. And I think maybe some of us can identify with this. Certainly, we've seen just using AI tools maybe in day to day, like there are some things that it's really good at, especially when it comes to maybe helping with quality review. But like when it comes to qualitative like answers or whatnot, it will confidently give you wrong answers, not infrequently either. And so it's always good to kind of question that. And but I think recognizing the fallibility of it is really important. And AI, will not know the difference between, like we kind of talked about. It'll treat kind of duplicates the same, anything that might be old, if it's, and then we're kind of going back to our metadata. Is it metadata or the data quality? They're intermingled there. But yeah, conflicting data, equally, it just kind of, it kind of, gathers from all of those different sources, which is kind of problematic. And so I think this really goes back to, will kind of come back to haunt you a bit, spending all these years uh, trying to get our information in good order and have it clean and all of these things. Now is kind of the time where it's not just, can't really find something, or we're having expensive discovery costs. Now we're kind of feeding these really important technology models where we're making really big decisions, all this types of information that might be, out of well, could be inaccurate, could be old, could be duplicative, all these different types of things. So
Could also
um,
just be costly, I mean, depending on your model, it could cost more tokens to be reviewing bad, undated or outdated and useless information. And so
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think this is, kind of tying us to our sixth pillar, even where we talk about adoption and issues, when we're trying to get folks and trying to onboard different AI systems and solutions within our organization. If we've got bad information quality and we've got bad results, that's really going to interfere with adoption. AI can make a mistake once, confidently make it twice. People won't trust it. They won't want to use it. They won't trust they won't kind of trust the results. So it really kind of, again, all is interdependent. And this really does take us back to those IG RIM roots. You might have been spending a lot of your career, I think we all have, trying to make sure that we're keeping our inventories, our records trustworthy, so people can find things, so they can rely on it, so they know, where things are when we really need them. And so now it's really, it's the same discipline, but the stakes are higher. Bad content used to mean like a slow search, or maybe end up with a fine for noncompliance, or an adverse audit finding or something like that. But now it can deliver wrong answers at scale, and to people who act on it in really important and, sometimes costly ways. So, this again, we've got the same policy living in three places, procedures nobody ever marked as obsolete. Old abandoned like team sites, for example, that are no longer used. These are now kind of a whole bigger issue when we're using it for AI. And I actually like ending with this on this slide because this has been a brighter point in conversations, with clients more and more. And I think we're doing, we do a lot of kind of program strategies, assessments, and email assessments and strategies. And more we can talk about how AI kind of can help you get past this manual slog of, having to find, organize, everything. Of course, there's always some, you know, there's been always some solutions to help you go through your information and clean it up, as a look back. For example, there have always been some solutions, but now with AI, I think it's really upped the game. And, we're talking about classifiers that can help you flag duplicates and stale content and more at scale and more, I think, intelligently. Of course, it's intelligent because it's been trained and tested. It's not something I think we want to say, oh, these are great solutions. They're not out of the box solutions either. But some of these AI solutions that you can bring in to help you prepare for AI certainly can make a really big impact in greater time and reduce kind of the manual efforts that are typically required. And so it turns in from from kind of like this more of a manual effort into kind of a project that has direct oversight, human touch, ensuring quality here and there. So a bit of a different type of cleanup effort with AI involved in helping that.
All right, this one is a quiz, so we don't have a poll for it. So answer in the comments.
Yeah, an AI assistant confidently gives a wrong answer, sourced from an outdated internal document. Which pillar failed first? What do y'all think? Was it technology? Was it the information quality that was most likely to blame? Workforce adoption? Metadata? You can drop in the chat whether you think it's A, B, C, D. Let's kind of see where people are landing on this.
Lots of bees.
I like that. Wow.
Yeah. And I do think that's a clear front runner for sure.
Wow. Well, okay. I mean, pretty good. Yeah. I mean, um, I think that there's a mostly right answer from our perspectives. Oh, I like the B. Bzz. But yeah, I think that I think that calling out B, information quality, is probably the mostly right answer. It's a little bit tricky because, yeah, was it retention and disposition, as in the outdated internal document? It should have been disposed of, or maybe there was a metadata issue. It didn't really have metadata, or it was inaccurate or insufficient or whatnot. So we kind of see how it all plays together. But I think mostly B as an answer is a good one, but it kind of tests us to think about that a little bit harder. So nice job, everybody. Yeah, possibly D. Yep.
All right, let's talk a little bit about metadata. I really see it as the difference between search and judgment, where search can find text, but judgment requires knowing the status of what was found, whether it's a draft or final, public or restricted, current or superseded, authoritative or someone's working copy. Without that context, the retrieval treats, like Jen was saying, an old draft and today's signed version as potentially equally credible, which is dangerous. And then, another big part of metadata is it helps us a lot with security and what AI can access and what we need to guard it from. So metadata, it's how access decisions can kind of travel along with content. Sensitivity labels, security classifications, record status. They're what let a retrieval tool exclude what it should never surfaced, which is why weak labeling can turn over permission content into an incident the moment that AI is let loose on it and the search gets fast.
Hmm.
So again, this goes back to our roots. It's a pretty familiar pillar for the records audience. We've got our file plans, our taxonomies, our retention schedules and codes, and our security classifications, and all the descriptive standards behind those. And so findability and defensibility have always rested on discipline description. And the work that we've been doing in RIM for decades, it's now kind of a vital input layer for AI. So
Hmm.
hopefully this is all already in order. If it's not, AI is just another good reason to focus on it. And I think there's an honest acknowledgement here. Manual tagging has always kind of been a weak point.
Hmm.
Users often skip it, apply it inconsistently, don't want to deal with it. They apply the first value if you've set up drop downs and more sophisticated methods. I think recognizing that is kind of important, and that it's kind of been a failed effort in some contexts, for some people. And that's that's another place where AI comes in handy. It's actually pretty good at this if trained correctly to classify, understand the metadata points that it needs to apply. And even it can even do some of this stuff at ingestion if it's configured correctly.
Hmm.
So, I mean, AI really can, if trained correctly, turn a permanent backlog of tagging metadata into, a human touch reviewing, sampling, making sure things are going correctly, and kind of making sure that it's doing it correctly. So that the records management side has the potential with AI to shift from reviewing everyone else's tags, recognizing who's doing it incorrectly, to kind of seeing whether AI is getting it correct and sampling that, auditing that, and making sure that the model is working
Hmm.
correctly.
Hmm.
Um, Again, got to caution it every time. Machine applied metadata still needs human owned kind of definition behind it and review of it. It's our job as the records managers or the information governance professionals
Hmm.
to maintain the vocabulary, make sure that the model is applying the terms correctly and monitoring drift. So, um,
Yeah.
I think that our taxonomy here is this is how these interrelate again. That might be governance, but making sure that it's getting applied correctly,
Hmm.
is part of this pillar metadata.
This kind of brings to mind, I think, like a nightmare scenario that I've kind of thought about, but mistagged sensitive content is really how an organization-wide AI agent or co-pilot or something like that can bring up the wrong file to the wrong audience, and that's kind of a nightmare scenario. So
Potentially a breach.
exactly. It really is kind of thinking about that tagging is not just a way to classify, but it's a method of access control. And that's kind of an important way, I think, to think about it. It's not just about findability. So,
Mhm.
yeah. All right. Pillar 4, retention and disposition. So fresh beans in, spent grounds out, and a clean machine. Some of these really great stats. We've got a rot statistic. Anytime we can put a statistic on rot in any sort of conversation or deck, I don't know. It's just one of those things. And for anybody who's not familiar with rot, it's redundant, obsolete, trivial. It's my personal favorite acronym, but maybe it's just me. And so this is really kind of, I think, mind blowing. And this is from a 2026 stat, nonetheless. You would think that perhaps this is a lot older, but 85% of stored data is dark or redundant, obsolete, or trivial or rot, leaving about 15% business critical. And and so that's really kind of crazy. And when we start thinking about it in AI now, rot's not just about, the risk, the extra storage, the non-relevant information, that your organization, this is potentially information records that AI is ingesting, this dark data that can kind of taint things for sure. Another stat here, up to 25% of infrastructure costs is cut by removing rot, and that means it's also easier to govern. So here's a cost saving statistic. Those always are really great, I think resonate with leadership. And, we could always use another good reason to kind of get the resources that we need to really properly handle the information that we might be struggling to maintain. So yeah, those cost saving numbers are also always really compelling with leadership as well. But yeah, keeping everything just in case, it's not caution, it's risk plus noise. We're talking about, really for years, organizations kept all this information because it was safer. Certainly, privacy programs helped kind of turn that around a bit and begin shifting that mindset away towards more minimization, purpose limitation, more intentional retention. And so AI really is kind of reinforcing that shift for a different reason. And the privacy question, was should we have all this information? Should we really be keeping it? Do we need it? And the AI question now is, do we want this information influencing what our tools find, summarize, or recommend? So a bit of a shift in how we think about that. And, mindset should be that, this is why we're deleting things. It makes our AI system smarter, fewer duplicates, drafts, abandoned files. It means less noise for the tools to sort through. So the issue is really not just about volume. It is quality, it's risk, it's governance. Keeping everything can make AI outputs less reliable, not more complete. And I think there's a big tension here. That's a struggle as well, because at the same time, folks I think are more maybe inclined in organizations to try to keep information just in case, because things are evolving so quickly. We don't really know and how to sort through everything and understand what will really hold the most value for AI purposes. But certainly we kind of want to fight against this idea that more is better. We still need to be intentional about retention and disposition. So taking us back to our IG RIM roots, these fundamentals still apply and are probably just more important than ever. Retention schedules, legal holds, disposition, defensible destruction. The model might need the data or needs data. That's not a retention rule. So yeah, AI does exacerbate this. And as organizations are beginning to really fully realize the potential of their information, it does make deletion decisions more difficult. So uh, and yeah, we have some. I think this is a little bit of a repeat earlier, but AI surfaces, disposition is a lot of good search capabilities. This again overlaps a bit with the information quality and how it can help kind of clean up your information. So I won't kind of belabor this point too much. But one other thing I think I really wanted to make sure to talk about a bit on this is also shadow AI information. AI is also creating all these different record types, whether it's compliance, um, deleting the source document, or, the information by auto disposition, maybe within the AI solution system, the AI agent itself, that doesn't always get rid of everything. Once context has been indexed, it gets embedded, it gets cached, copied. You're chasing derivatives of information, not documents. And this is getting saved depending on, what type of AI you're using, but even something like Claude, you would be surprised how many different places and ways it's saving information. So even within Claude, for example, if you're implementing some sort of auto disposition, um, you know, understand that there could still be things that are being saved all over in different locations on the cloud that would still remain discoverable and are not necessarily being deleted pursuant to that. So this is just kind of a new risk consideration, and it also can end up being very voluminous. And I don't think people are fully aware of that yet. It's just another kind of thing that we're kind of chasing and making sure that we're accountable for when it comes to implementing our retention schedules and deletion appropriately.
Yeah, we're hearing from clients that if they're allowing AI to write to files, it's missing some of that in its auto disposition, and it's leading to potentially hundreds of gigs of information being built up. Most of it, is going to be rot or just trivial, and so something to keep an eye on for sure. All right, next poll question.
Rot again. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's always kind of nice to touch base on this because even though it's kind of a silly acronym, it's been around for a while, it is still, you know, uh, it's still a struggle, and it's still important, and it's still, one of the main issues I think we're addressing, and a renewed sense of importance in addressing rot in AI with AI as we talked about.
And I think the great thing about AI, like Jen said, is it's just another reason to be on top of this stuff. It's another quiver in our RIM IG, toolbox to use as a reason to be proactive about trying to get rid of this. And it also helps us get rid of it too if it's done correctly. All
Okay.
right. So we can see, not too bad. The majority are a healthy layer of dust, so that could be worse. We do still have a lot that are, generally no idea or have quite a bit, and so
Mm,
no one said 20% were tidy, which is
yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah, this kind of doesn't really align with that 85% statistic. So
That's
I don't
good.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although our audience could be
promising.
skewed because we've got records people probably, and that's a good step.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, technology. We again, as Jen said, we placed this one fifth intentionally. It's not going to be the strategy, and so like we emphasized earlier, aside from retention capabilities, it's not going to be something that we have a lot of control over as IG RIM professionals. Hopefully, we could get in there and make sure that there are disposition capabilities at a minimum, but the tool that we go for or that an organization goes for is probably going to be driven by other things, and we kind of have to recognize that. The 14.4 stat on AI tools and average enterprise runs versus how many IT knows about, I thought that was really interesting, that gap there. Most organizations are running a lot of unplanned AI. They probably have a whole AI portfolio that is unplanned and ungoverned, which makes the discovery and consolidation conversation before it's procured, a big one. And so for our, I think it for our IG and RIM roots, these are a lot of the same questions we ask for any enterprise content management or EDRMS rollout. Where the content lives, who has access, how permissions are provisioned and reviewed, what the audit tail captures. Those are all things that we've done before and we know about or we're ready for. Hopefully, if you've ran a platform migration, you've answered all these questions before. But I think the durable point is that the audit trails remain the evidence of control here. Policy describes the intent, and the log is what shows a regulator, an auditor, whoever it may be, that everything was done above board. And so I think that the hit home point is that if a new AI tool can't produce a usable log of what it accessed and what it generated, it's probably not enterprise ready, no matter how good the demo was. And I think that's a powerful message that you could go into, if you're on an IG council or an AI council or whatever it may be, you can take that point to the table when you're evaluating which platform to use and really try to drive that one home. And then again, using AI to prepare for AI, won't cover that one here. But it's especially the access security side of it, I think is something that's worth considering as well.
All right. Let's talk about workforce adoption, the baristas and the drinkers. How do we get people on board? And this is the sixth pillar, but I don't think it should be like an afterthought. I think all of these pillars, as we're planning and implementing and kind of rolling things out, workforce adoption should be something that's still kind of top of mind. Is this really going to be something that can be adopted, will be adopted, is the easiest method to follow, for example. And, here's some stats here. 93% of employees admit they're entering information into AI tools without approval. That's crazy because that's 93%. That's so high. And that's, think about, what are they not admitting to, or who's not admitting to it? I mean, so that's voluntary information shared. So you can guess that, this is really probably a pretty prevalent practice. If kind of there's no eye being kept on it, there's no controls around it, you don't have your other pillars in place. 20% of breaches involve shadow AI, and that's adding a 670,000 to breach cost. I mean, I think this kind of makes sense, I guess, in my mind when I think about this. Meaning, anytime really there's under certain circumstances, somebody is going and using certain types of classified information, proprietary information that might be subject to certain protections or whatnot. Anytime they kind of take that offline and are using it in shadow tools, or maybe going to their go-to solution that they're most familiar with, or anytime that happens, we can kind of even think about that as a breach. Some are certainly more consequential than others, but yeah, we really still don't even kind of understand, I think, the full consequences of different types of information getting shared on non-enterprise, non-privacy protected solutions. So that's always kind of a really big risk there. And, I think, everything we've kind of covered so far, we're talking about really what the organization does. This pillar is about what people do, and when nobody's kind of watching as well. And so this is really kind of, I think, where the risk lies, and where AI programs can kind of go to quietly die. We know that just from our RIM experience, and having perfect policies that nobody follows. For example, the licenses get bought, we get the technology right off the bat. The pilot might go beautifully, actually. Leadership says that this is a win, and then 6 months later, folks aren't really onboarded. They're not on board. They're not using it appropriately or using it at all. And it's not necessarily because the tool was bad. It's because nobody really changed how they were doing the work. So that's something kind of really important to think about. And, nobody really, I think, wakes up planning to violate an AI policy. They wake up with a deadline, an objective, there's work to be done. And so people, the natural tendency is to route around any sort of friction, make sure that they have access and can do their job to the best of their ability and the most efficiently. That's people's inclination, and it always has been. But when the option that they're provided is slower, or it's clunkier, or it's simply like not available yet, or it's providing inaccurate, it's not reliable, there's inaccuracy issues, the risk is that folks are really going to some of these consumer, you know, readily available tools out there. There's no data agreement behind them. There's no guarantees that they won't train on your company's information or data. That is shadow AI, and it's kind of, I think we think of it as like the new shadow IT. Kind of the same concept, same instinct, and there's definitely a lot of risk around that. And
And it's
so,
prevalent. We know that it's very prevalent.
yeah, it really is, and I think that that's kind of one of the issues. And you can spell it out in a policy that certain tools are sanctioned and others aren't. And again, Despite this, I think people might stray from that, especially if there's, no kind of way to kind of track that. There's really no oversight and, no periodic audits or monitoring of that type of behavior. So that kind of goes alongside that change management aspect as well. So yeah, I think for us RIM folks, this is nothing new. It's just kind of the same issue, but maybe higher stakes in some ways and higher risks. Definitely amplifying risks surrounding breach of protected information.
Okay, we've got our last poll question here. Go ahead and launch it. So where will you focus first when you start or continue your AI readiness journey?
Yeah, which pillar are we going to go to? I think, the idea is to start somewhere and, don't let perfection get the best of your efforts. As with any kind of RIM, IG effort, it's about the maturity journey. And of course, we would love to get to perfection, and maybe some of you have, but maybe I doubt that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But uh, so always finding the right place to start, and maybe it's one of these pillars in particular you see as a good place to start in your weakness and where it makes sense.
All right. Looks like we've got a lot of governance voters. We've also got some ROT and then retention and disposition. So those are all, I think, really good places to start.
Yeah, the governance, that's a really great place to start. Well, all right, we just have a few minutes left here, and just some stats here I thought would make everybody feel better. As I mentioned, less than 1% of organizations have fully operationalized responsible AI. And this is a fairly recent, 2025 in the context of AI might actually feel like a long time ago. I'd be curious to see what that looks like now. But, again, I think a lot of us are on this same journey together and kind of building up the programs. 81% are still in the earliest stages of maturity. Yeah, so if you feel like you're behind, you're definitely in good company. And some 4 kind of key takeaways here to get started um, on your journey as well. I won't kind of belabor these or go through. We've kind of covered these, but to just summarize, and starting might be, as with a RIM project, put together a timeline. Maybe start with a certain repository that you feel like is a good candidate to get AI ready. And start small if you haven't started at all, and that's kind of always the goal. Just make some baby steps. So
All
all right.
right. Well, as far as our next virtual coffee goes, look for an announcement on that soon. I think it's going to be probably late October, early November after ARMA InfoCon. I think we're going to be doing a presentation on, we might have Warren, I think, as our guest, and we will be kind of doing a panel on our ARMA InfoCon presentation that we're doing this year, kind of making the case that AI is kind of saving us from this data over accumulation mess, and it's almost necessary at this point. So we look forward to talking to you then, and yeah, like I said, look for more information about the timing of that here pretty soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.